Hi guys, let's talk about chapter 5 of Mice and Men. Starts out with some imagery where you get the description of the barn. You should know by now that the story is told in third person omniscient point of view because you have now just Lenny by himself with the puppy. And we find out pretty quickly that the puppy has been killed accidentally by Lenny. Should not be a big surprise because repeatedly you get the impression that he does not know how to control himself and how to control his own strength. And all the times he killed the mice, that sort of foreshadowed this idea. But the question in your rap sheet was asking what event is foreshadowed by Lenny killing the puppy. And that is the fact that he ends up killing Curly's wife later in the chapter. As he's sitting there lamenting the puppy, one of his big concerns is that now he won't get to tend the rabbits, and he wants to try to figure out a way to hide the fact that the puppy's been killed. And it's during all of that Curly's wife shows up. She's actually pretty kind to him and shows him sympathy, tries to tell him it's not a big deal that he killed the puppy, that it's okay. At first, Lenny really doesn't want anything to do with her because he's been warned repeatedly that he's not supposed to talk to her. But eventually they get talking and she tells him a lot of stuff. And this is a really important passage in the book for you where you find out that there's more to Curly's wife than meets the eye. And she talks about the fact that she feels like she could have been something. She says that she met a guy, and the first guy that she met asked her to come with a show, but her mother wouldn't let her because she was too young. And then she meets another guy, and he says that she could have been in pictures, and she believes him. And he says, I'm going to write to you as soon as I get back to Hollywood. And then she never gets a letter, and she thinks that her mom took the letter from her. But in reality, you guys are supposed to understand, the reader is supposed to understand, that he was just trying to take advantage of her and told her all these nice things so that she'd be willing to, do whatever he wanted to do, right? That he could have his way with her. And she doesn't realize this. And then she meets Curly at that same dance place that she was at, the Riverside Dance Palace, and that she says she married him like right away, more or less. Well, and then she ends up trapped with him, right? She tells us on page 89, I ain't told this to nobody before. Maybe I oughtn't to. I don't like Curly. He ain't a nice fella. And so she gets herself trapped in this loveless marriage with this narcissist who only ever talks about himself, never listens to her, never pays any attention to her. So you see that theme of loneliness again with Curly's wife, that she's really deeply lonely, and that's why she goes and talks to the other guys, and she probably literally has no idea how else to get a guy's attention other than by looking pretty because of how she's been raised. So then, as they continue talking, you see that they have this thing in common, that they both like to touch soft things. And they're very tactile, right? Tactile meaning that touch is important to them. And that's when she offers to let Curly touch her hair, and that leads to him panicking, right? When she tells him to stop, he panics, doesn't know what to do. He holds on tighter. We've seen this repeatedly. He holds on tighter to the girl's dress. He holds on tighter to Curly's hand when he's attacking Curly. So when he panics, that's what Lenny does. He just doesn't know what else to do. And so that was pretty well foreshadowed as well, the way that this would kind of go down. He's afraid he's going to get in trouble, and so he just hangs on tighter, and ultimately he breaks her neck. Totally unintentional. Realizes he did a bad thing. He leaves. He takes the puppy with him because he doesn't want anybody to see that, because that'll just make it worse. There's more imagery in this scene as well, where you see the passage of time to let you know that it's not immediately after Lenny leaves that Candy comes in to the barn and finds the body. He gets George because he knows right away that George is gonna know what to do about it. He probably suspects that it was Lenny. They realize that Curly is going to want to exact his own justice. That's what Candy tells George that there's no way he's going to let Lenny get away. And Candy asks, do you think we could still get the farm? Just you and me, we could do it, right? And George says to him, I think I knowed all along. This is on the bottom of page 94. I'm going to read it to you guys. Where he says, I think I knowed from the very first. I think I knowed we'd never do her. He used to like to hear about it so much, I got to thinking maybe we would. And that's when you know the dream is just not going to happen. And that's what makes Candy so upset at Curly's wife, which you see in a little bit. So George tells Candy to tell the other guys about what happened while George goes back to the bunkhouse, because he doesn't want it to look suspicious for the guys to think that he had anything to do with what happened. The fact that he goes back to the bunkhouse is important because you'll understand in chapter 6 what he did when he was in the bunkhouse. Candy says to the dead body after George leaves, everybody knowed you'd mess things up. And then he talks about his plans and the dream and how he thinks that it's her fault, that the dream isn't going to happen. And of course, it's more than just that, but he definitely blames her. And that's why he's angry with her. They get back and you see when Slim checks her pulse, he shows some compassion for Curly's wife, which most of the other guys are unable to do because they just see her as a tart. Again, that's meant to show you that Slim is this heroic character, fits the hero archetype. Curly says that he's going to shoot Lenny. He says specifically, I'm going to shoot him in the guts. When he finds him, he doesn't just want to kill him, he wants him to suffer. And George tries to convince Slim that they should just lock Lenny up. But Slim says that he's afraid that Curly's going to hurt him. But he also says, do you really want him strapped down and put in a cage? Because that's what they're going to do to Lenny if he gets caught. We find out that Carlson's Luger has been stolen when he comes back in. And at the very end of the chapter, George tries to convince Curly not to shoot Lenny, not to hurt him. And of course, he emphasizes again that he intends to shoot him in the guts, that of course he's going to shoot him. He says he has Carlson's Luger because that's what they all assume, is that Lenny stole the Luger and took it with him. You guys at the very least should know that that's not the case, that he's not the one that really took it, because Lenny wouldn't think of a thing like that. That's just not how he operates, which begs the question, who really stole it? The other question I asked you guys about on your rap sheet is the fact that Curly's wife is never named. And I think I alluded to this in an earlier video, but it's really a very intentional choice on Steinbeck's part to not give her a name, because by not giving her a name, the only thing she's identified with is Curly. She's like a possession. She's a trophy. She doesn't mean anything. She doesn't have her own identity. And that all ties back to that theme, again, of loneliness. She's a lonely character. Candy is a lonely character. Crooks is a lonely character. And Steinbeck wants you to understand what loneliness can do to a person and the impact that can have on somebody, that it kind of twists your soul. I mean, it doesn't so much to Candy, but you see that with both Crooks and Curly's wife. So Curly's wife is portrayed in a pretty negative light, but you're also supposed to feel bad for her because she's a product of her environment, and she doesn't really know how else to be in order to get some attention because she's been treated so poorly and kind of ignored, especially by Curly. So that's the end of chapter 5. Chapter 6 is the final chapter in the book, which we'll be wrapping up next week. Hope you guys are doing well, and see you soon.